There is no doubt that the Legend of Zelda series is, by far, my favorite game series of all time. I consider each and every Zelda game a masterpiece in its own right. The Zelda games offer something truly unique every time, and I will never tire or cease to crave adventuring through the magical kingdom of Hyrule or its many surrounding lands. Since the age of 10, I have been absolutely obsessed with this wonderful series, sometimes to an unhealthy degree, even. With that said, I have my personal favorites, and I realize that others have theirs. If your favorite Zelda game doesn't appear on this list, that is not an indictment of that game by me. I will even give a few honorable mentions right out of the bat. First, Skyward Sword. I absolutely love that game. It has a truly rich narrative that adds tons of lore and context to the world of Zelda, and boasts some truly unique and memorable dungeons, as well as one of the best final boss fights in gaming history. Link's Awakening and the Minish Cap are both great examples of how you can take the Zelda formula on the go, showing that just because the game is on a handheld, Nintendo didn't need to compromise quality, as the two games are both some of the best handheld games around. Link's Awakening in particular took strides to bring a more story-driven Zelda game, but one that still featured the same great gameplay that was seen on the console Zeldas at the time. I take it you get the general picture by now. I love all the games, even if they aren't on this list. With that said, I decided that for my list I will do my top 7 favorite Zelda games, as 5 doesn't allow for as many entries, and 10 seems a bit much. Going and thinking back on all of the games on this list, I was surprised where some of them were placed, but others landed where I expected them. This list would have looked very different a year ago, as the latest Zelda title, Breath of the Wild, was not out at the time. With all that to say, here's my list of my top favorite Zelda games of all time. Please enjoy. Number 7, The Wind Waker. The Wind Waker came out in 2003. Back in those days, it was often scoffed at for its kiddie look, as gamers were used to the Nintendo 64's more realistic visual style. We all know the story by now. Everyone played the game and fell in love with it. Some even call it the best Zelda game ever made. And while I don't personally agree with that, it's still one of the best, and I can see why so many people cherish it as much as they do. The game's storyline is one of the most rich in Zelda's history, offering what is hands down the best and most human incarnation of Ganondorf, the series' main villain. The game's plot starts out simple, with Link living on an island, but by the end of it all, he carries the weight of the entire ocean on his shoulders. The visual style is beautiful, and has aged as gracefully as a game from that period could. Controls and gameplay feel treated to near perfection, and Wind Waker has some of the most fun and visually appealing combat of any Zelda game, or any game for that matter. Dungeons, while few, are all fun and well designed, and also well paced for the most part. Boss fights put those of other Zelda titles to shame. With that said, while I enjoyed sea travel for the most part, the Triforce hunt near the final act of the game severely hindered the pace for me. It just felt tacked on and anticlimactic. If it weren't for that, this game may be higher on my list. If I were judging by the HD remake on Wii U, it would be, as that version fixed many of the issues and offered a much more fluid and fun experience for it. That said, Wind Waker is a game I love dearly, and I'm happy to place it in 7th place. Number 6, Twilight Princess. I admit it, this game is one of my favorites due to the fond memories I have of playing it in late middle school for hours on end. I can't begin to articulate how excited I was for this game when it finally came out, after a period that felt like forever. When it finally came, I played and replayed it to what felt like no end, basically to completion. I know this is a polarizing installment within the hardcore Zelda community, but after going back and playing it again in 2016 on the Wii U, it only reinforced the love that I have for the game. I won't deny the game's flaws. The difficulty's way too easy, the opening section is too long, the world map is big, but it's too empty. All that to say, the things I love about the game far outweigh those issues. Midna is hands down the best sidekick that Link has ever been graced with. with a genuinely gripping character development that we really care for her plight near the end of the game especially. The plot itself has a darker tone, yet it is still offset with plenty of sillier characters and moments to balance it out. Like the mailman, I'm looking at you! The dungeon design is some of the best that the Zelda series has ever boasted. Each and every dungeon has its own unique puzzles, feel, and charm. Whether walking on the ceilings with magnetic boots, breaking tons of ice blocks and finding ingredients to Yeti soup, controlling statues in the Temple of Time, and even Spider-Manning it through the sky. Each dungeon is topped off with a boss battle with proportions out of this world. The scripted moments are also a joy to play, whether it be hunting down a Goblin King on horseback, participating in a Wild West-style bow and arrow shootout. The scripted story moments provide an awesome and cinematic experience that still manage to feel right at home in a Zelda game. I even enjoyed the Wolf Link sections, and I realize I'm in the minority there. While some consider the visuals muddy and jaggy, I've always found the art design to be beautiful, feeling like Zelda meets Lord of the Rings. The music itself, while not the best in Zelda's history, still provides some great tracks, such as Midna's theme and the Hyrule Field theme. The basic gameplay elements, and combat especially, refine the 3D Zelda formula to near perfection. It's reasons like this that Twilight Princess is at my number 6 Zelda game. Alright, moving to the top 5. Thanks for bearing with me so far, ladies and gents. Number 5, A Link to the Past. This game, as well as my number 4, could almost have been interchangeable, but nonetheless I have my own reasons for putting this list as is. For one, A Link to the Past is the game that really perfected the original game's format and introduced Zelda mainstays like the Master Sword, the hookshot, and what has come to be known as the Zelda formula, which has been used in most Zelda games up until very recently. A Link to the Past had not one, but 2 worlds to explore, a light world and a dark world. The game pulled it off masterfully, requiring Link to travel between both worlds in order to reach and solve the many perilous dungeons in his quest to free Zelda from the grasp of the evil Aghanim. Aghanim? How do you pronounce his name again? Only to fulfill his destiny by destroying the evil King Ganon once and for all. The game is packed with hidden secrets, sword and item upgrades, and more besides. Of all the classic Zelda games, this one has aged the best, with the right mix of challenge, puzzles, items that continue to have a use even after the dungeons you find them in, awesome boss fights, tight controls, a beautiful sprite-drawn art direction, the introduction of some of the most famous Zelda songs. A Link to the Past is just as relevant to us now in the present. I finally played this game and beat it 15 years after its initial release, and still fell in love with it. Over time, I've played the game several times over. It's one of those rare games that you can play over and over and never get bored of. It's kinda crazy, and I've done so on many occasions. And that is why this game sits at number 5. Number 4, A Link Between Worlds. Almost 25 years after Link to the Past was first released, the game finally got a sequel, and one that managed to be even better in many respects. In 2013, the Zelda series was starting to work itself into a bind of sorts, with less and less variation on the established Zelda formula. Old-school Zelda fans clamored for a non-linear Zelda experience that once again allowed them to explore Hyrule to their heart's content. Link Between Worlds provided just that, while still adhering to the Zelda formula from a plot point, having Link collect 3 items, get the Master Sword, and then having to start his real adventure. The game threw out the other half of the rulebook. No longer is Link confined to a linear dungeon path. You could do the dungeons in almost any order you desired. Instead of getting the items in dungeons, you can now rent and eventually purchase them from Ravio. Moreover, the game now had a stamina vessel, so as to have unlimited arrows, bombs, and the like, but having your stamina deplete, allowing and basically encouraging more strategy and making sure players didn't spam. Like A Link to the Past, there are 2 worlds Link must explore, Hyrule and Lorule. This is done through the game's unique ability allowing Link to literally turn into a painting and walk sideways on walls and cliff sides. While a simple gimmick, it's unique and it provided for some very fun and unconventional puzzles. Speaking of puzzles, Link Between Worlds managed to balance out non-linearity while still having some brilliant level design. Each of the many dungeons Link goes to feels unique and memorable, my personal favorites being the Palace of Darkness and of course, Lorule Castle. Set dungeons even provide optional rewards that you can use to upgrade your sword and stamina vessel. boss fights are incredible. Story to this game is light, even compared to A Link to the Past, which is the game's biggest drawback in my opinion. The difficulty is a little unbalanced due to the less linear structure, but these are small potatoes compared to the brilliance of the game as a whole. Not only is it one of the best looking 3DS games that runs at 60 frames per second, but the soundtrack is even more amazing, having both remixed tunes from A Link to the Past and unforgettable new ones to boot, such as the Lolo Castle theme. This game is a treasure in and of itself, and it deserves its number 4 spot on my list. Number 3. Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask is the most unconventional, darkest, weirdest, and most twisted Zelda game in existence. And that is what makes it so good. The second N64 Zelda game released in 2000 and was developed in less than a year. The game reused many of the assets left over from Ocarina of Time, such as character models, enemy models, and several textures. While the game may look like Ocarina, it couldn't be more different. For starters, this is one of the only Zelda games to take place not in Hyrule, but in a distant land of Termina. The game only features Zelda herself in a flashback. Ganondorf, Triforce, Master Sword are never seen or mentioned. Instead, the villains of this game take the form of a masked miscreant who transforms Link into a sinister creature at the start of the game. In a giant mood, his sole intent is to crush the town below it into oblivion. The gameplay consists of Link repeating the same 3 in-game days over and over again in a Groundhog Day-esque cycle, all the while doing typical Zelda-ish things like sneaking into dungeons, collecting keys, getting an item like the bow or hookshot, and fighting the boss to release an imprisoned spirit in order to save the world. This time, Link can transform. With the mask ability, Link can now turn into a Goron, a Deku Scrub, or a Zora. Each form changes up the gameplay and forces the player to think outside the box in ways they may not be used to in a Zelda game. While the game only has 4 main dungeons, only 2 of which are the cream of the crop, it's the experience getting to the dungeons that is just as important. Because of the 3-day cycle, characters you meet and the experience Link goes through have more genuine emotional weight, as you know that the people you meet will literally die at the end of the 3rd day unless you stop the moon. It's really what you put into the game that you get out of it. If you only do the main dungeons, you'll have a blast, but the real story of Majora's Mask is in its many side quests. Majora's Mask has the most in-depth side quest of any Zelda game. The Anju Cafe love side quest is long, but the payoff is rewarding in several ways, particularly from an emotional story perspective as well as a gameplay one. Majora's Mask's story is brilliant in that it focuses on the individuals, rather than the fate of the whole kingdom like most Zeldas do, which brings a much welcomed character-driven narrative to the series in my opinion. Soundtrack in the game manages to be both melancholic, creepy, and joyful. Majora's Mask is a game I hold near and dear to my heart, and it gets number 3 on my top 7 Zelda games list. Alright, now we're going to my top 2 favorite Zelda games. Number 2. Ocarina of Time. What can I possibly say about Ocarina of Time that hasn't already been said ad nauseum? The game is a classic, pure and simple. It remains, and I honestly believe this, one of the greatest video games of all time, and the defining gaming moment for me, being the game that made me fall in love with gaming as a medium in the first place. The game itself brought with it tons of revolutions, like the context-sensitive button, the in-game cutscenes, and the lock-on targeting. As far as I'm concerned, this game is a textbook example of 3D gaming done right. Not only that, but if someone were to ask me to define what a classic is insofar as it relates to video games, Ocarina of Time would just straight up be my answer. The game feels pitch perfect all the way, with its epic tale of good against evil that brings time travel into the mix, the intricately well-crafted dungeons and locations, enemies and boss fights that are fun, epic, and altogether leave a lasting impression. The item selection that provides the perfect mix of quality and quantity. The for-the-time groundbreaking visuals, the killer soundtrack. This game had, and still has it all. For myself personally, this game holds a place in my heart that can never be carved out by any other game. While it's easy to say I'm simply nostalgic for this game, My love goes way deeper than just that. This is the game that showed me that gaming was more than just a simple pastime, and that through video games I could escape into a world of monsters, magic, and adventure. That I could find a magical sword lying in an ancient temple. That I could free the world from the grasp of an evil king. This game still invokes those feelings in me, and it always will. Ocarina of Time truly is, dare I say it, well, timeless. But here's the real kicker. I never thought in a million years that I would be putting this game at second place. So what game could possibly dethrone this masterpiece for me? Number 1. Breath of the Wild. That's right. In an unusual twist and turn of events, the newest installment reigns, in my book, as the new king. Breath of the Wild is a truly special game, and one that I seriously believe to have set a new benchmark for gaming, not just for Zelda, but for open world gaming in general. I could go on and on about the individual aspects of the game that I love and adore. I enjoyed the game's new method of storytelling. Combat is fantastic. Art design is beautiful. The atmospheric soundtrack struck the right notes for me. The shrines provided some of the most ingenious puzzles I have ever experienced. And the game has an out-of-this-world physics engine. I even enjoyed the Divine Beasts, though I'll contend that they weren't the best dungeons Zelda's ever had. And I even liked the breakable weapons, yeah! I loved the throwbacks to all the Zelda games from bygone eras. And all of that is true, but that's not what makes this my favorite Zelda game and my new favorite video game of all time. What makes this my favorite Zelda game is the world! Breath of the Wild has the most compelling game world that I have ever experienced. You can literally go wherever you desire, and everywhere you go there is something to discover. It's not about the destination, it's the journey that matters the most. Even if all you get is a small reward, or treated to a breathtaking view of the sun rising over the massive land of Hyrule, the feeling of being in the world is enough. Once you enter the world, you'll never want to leave it. As you look toward the mountains in the distance, you know that you can go there if you so choose. Your goal changes from one thing to another in an instant, yet it never feels inorganic. It feels like an adventure. And that is exactly what the game is from start to finish. Even after you beat the game, you feel that there is so much more for you yet to see and discover in this massive, broken yet beautiful world. The reason why this feeling sticks to me so much is that it reminds me of when I was a boy, often going hiking and camping as a Boy Scout. Even when having a destination in mind, I would often venture off the road less traveled and stumble upon things ranging from a small grove in the woods to even a lake. The fact that this game so elegantly reinstilled those feelings from my childhood in me speaks volumes to Nintendo's capacity to make games that feel so much more than simple pleasures. Breath of the Wild doesn't force a guide onto you, you are your own guide, and the path is whatever you choose it to be. It feels like a fully realized version of the game Shigeru Miyamoto desired to make way back in the 1980s. In other words, it's as though the developers were to say, "We've made this massive world, it is now yours, so go and explore it in abundance." A quote from J.R.O. Tolkien comes to mind that perfectly sums up this game for me. "Not all who wander are lost." And that is precisely why The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is my favorite Legend of Zelda game of all time, as it really does feel like my own personal playground. Well folks, those are my top 7 Zelda games. Now I want to hear from you. What are your favorites? Let me know in the comment section below, and please subscribe. I really enjoy making this video, and I really do sincerely hope you watch and enjoy it and share it, because I did work very hard on this. So please watch, enjoy this video, and don't forget to like. Till next time, peace out.